In this video, we're going to talk about selection, which basically means if, or if else, or in the case where you have multiple paths, a switch statement. So take a look at this video, and I encourage you in all of these videos to code along, even if you have to hit pause to catch up. Do the coding with me as we go through it, and then when you've seen the video, go out and play with it even more until you really feel comfortable with selection. Okay, for this video, we're going to talk about the second pillar of programming, known as selection. In selection, we are to the point where we are going to have to make decisions based on some Boolean comparison. So if it's true, we're going to do something else, or we're going to do something. And if it's false, we may either do nothing, or we may take a different course of action, or in a complex state, we may have 3 or 4 choices to make based on a value of a particular variable. Okay, so we're going to go through all of those. And as you can see on my screen, I've got my template back up. And the first thing I'm going to do is save this. File, save as, and we're going to call this select to keep it simple. And once again, I forgot to call it select.c, so I'm going to go here and say rename, and I'm going to make it select.c. Oh, I missed the dot too. There you go. Let's try that again. Rename select.c. And you know you get it right when you get that little C, okay? Now we're nice and colorized here, and I'm going to say this is selection. I'm going to hit Control Save. And every now and then, like I said, I like to close it and reopen it clean because I'm in a browser, and with caching, I've seen some really weird things happen. All right, and if you really want to make sure, you can take your terminal and you can say make select, and then /select does absolutely nothing because I've told it to do nothing. All right, here we are in our blank template. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to begin to get better about our main parameters. Okay, and so what I like to do in these videos is pack a lot of learning into them so that you can watch them a few times and really begin to get a lot of the nuance and some of the details about C programming. So in here, we're now not going to just accept void. We're going to put the parameters that occur when you launch a C program. And the first one is an integer, and it's called argc. And argc stands for the argument count. And we'll unpack that in a minute. But then we put a comma and we say character space pointer, and it's called argv, and it's an array of characters. Okay, so we're creating a pointer to an array of characters called argv. All right, now an array of characters is basically a string. So when we type / whatever the program name is, that is the first that is the first argument that is passed into the program. It's literally the name of the programming. The command that says run this program is the first argument. But if I were to type /select space 4, okay, 4 would represent the second argument that's passed in. So the argument count would then be 2. And the array, because array is always indexed from 0, array argv of 0 is always the program name. And argv of 1 would then be the second parameter, which would be the 4. Okay, and I'm going to unpack this and you're going to see it, but I want to just talk through it first. So basically the argc is the argument count, and it's a number, it's just an integer. And then we have an array of strings called argv. So the first position, which is 0, is going to hold literally the // program name. The second one would be the second parameter, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth, if the user passes that many in, okay? And it's basically done when we do this. So if I say /select how now brown cow, okay, argc would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And argv of 0 would be /select. Argv of 1 would be how. Argv of 2 would be now. Argv of 3 would be brown cow. And argv of 4 would be cow. And that's how that would work. Okay? So we're going to play with that right now. But that is how we bring those variables to become available for us. But the first thing we're going to start to learn is the if statement. Now, if you've done any programming, you're automatically going, what about if else? What about if else? What about else? We start with the first decision, which is if something's true, do this. There may not be anything else to do. I may only want to do something if a certain assessment is true. Okay? There may not be an else. And so the most basic statement of conditions is an if statement. So what I'm going to say is if, and then I have parentheses, and then I have a block of code. Okay? And that's it. Okay? If whatever is in here is true, I'm going to do what's in these. And if it's false, I'm just going to skip it. Okay? So I'm going to say if argc is less than or equal to 1, okay, I'm going to printf there were no additional command line parameters entered. And as usual, I'm going to try to forget my /n. All right? Now, if that is not true, so if I enter anything other than the program name, it should not print that. So let's see if we are correct. Save my changes. Let's make select, run select. And look at that, there were no additional command line parameters entered. And why didn't I thought I put my /n in there. I must have deleted it somehow. Okay, let's try that again. Clear, make, select. Dun, dun, dun. There were no additional command line parameters entered. So there was one, and remember my test was less than or equal to 1. Okay, so what if there's 2? Well, let's do that. /select blah. Notice nothing happened. Okay, because argc is 2. And if I go back here, it says, well, that's not true. So I'm going to skip it. And it just went to the next statement, which happens to be quit. Okay? All right. Now, what I'm going to show you is that it does truly go to the next command, because I'm going to say printf the value of, well, let's just say it this way. Whoops. At argv of 0 is, okay, and this is going to be %s because it's a string, and I'm going to need my /n that I love to forget, and I have to put in the variable which is argv of 0, and v stands for vector, and vector is another word for an array. Okay, and I cannot forget my semicolon. So basically, if there is, well, whether or not there is additional command line parameters entered, I'm going to show you the value at argv of 0. So let's save it. Control save. Let's go over here. Make it. And this time I'm going to put blind, and it shouldn't print the first sentence, but I should see the value. See that? And argv, see, it's the whole thing, including the dot slash, is argv of 0. Now, if I run it and it's only that, I get the sentence, but I still get that, okay? Because this is the next line after the if statement, okay? And that is a basic if. All right, now we're going to add an if-else statement. All right, and we're going to say if argc, the argument count, is greater than 1, okay, oops, that's, let's learn to type. There we go, now we've got our statement. Okay, and what I'm going to put in here is a for loop. And we're going to get into looping next. It's part of iteration, so just bear with me on this one. I'm going to go from 0 to x is less than argc. But I'm going to loop through all of them. And I'm going to need another printf, so I'm just going to steal this one. And in here, I'm going to put a %d where the digit is, and that's going to be %s with my n, and I'm going to put x as my indexer. So what I've done here is I've said the value at argv of, and this is going to be the value for my indexer, and then I'm going to put the actual string, which is the argv of x, because x is a variable. And we're going to get into looping in a bit, but I just kind of want you to see that I'm going to loop through all of the additional parameters and put them on a line so you can see it. All right, so if the for loop looks weird, don't worry about it. That's coming in the next video. But we're going to say dot slash select how now brown cow. And I've even put a period at the end of cow. And you'll see that it literally picks it up. So if I count these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I should see 5 things going down. Okay, now this is from the first print statement that's still in there. But then I loop and show it again, 0 through 4, dot select how now brown cow, and it picks up the period. Okay, so it's the space that separates each of them. Okay, so if I say, let's clear this, and let's say dot slash select A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, I'm going to get them all. Okay, and again, this top one is because I actually call that print twice. Okay, so that's how you can bring in all of the things that the user feeds into you positionally as part of running the program. And again, you're going to see that when we do a Caesar cipher, because your command would look like something like this. Caesar 3, okay? And you're going to pass that 3, and what you're telling your own program is, I want you to run a Caesar of 3 on whatever the string is I give you. Or it could be a Caesar of 3, this is my plain text, okay, depending on how you write the code. All right, so you're going to have a string that you're going to encrypt, and you're going to give it a value of what you want the Caesar cipher to read. And so you're going to pull that in. So I wanted to use conditionals as a way to kind of show you how argc and argv work at the same time. So that's another if, though. What if we want to do something otherwise, so that if it's just one, I want to do something else? So I then add an else at the end of the curly bracket, add another set of code, and this is what's going to execute if this is false. Notice I don't need another set of braces in here, because if this is true, it's going to do what's in here. Otherwise, it's going to do what's in here. Okay? So it's a binary choice. If this is true, it goes here. If it's false, it's coming here. Okay? And again, all I think I'm going to do in here is just one of these. So I'm just going to show you the value at arg0. Okay? Argv of 0. So now we should see it once, twice, 3 times. All right? Let's see if we get that. Make select. And let's just run dot select as it is. Okay? Well, 2, because we got inside this if. Right? So there were no additional command line parameters. We showed you that anyway, and then we showed you as part of the else. So what I can do is, in here, I'm just going to say inside else. Okay, so that we can see very clearly. And here I'm just going to say next step after first if test. Okay, so we'll make it a little more explicit. Clear, make select. So if I just do /select, okay, it's tabbed over. There were no additional command line parameters entered. Next step after the first if test, there it is. And inside the else, there it is again. Okay. I must have hit a tab or something. So basically, there's no additional command line parameters entered. So it skipped that. It was inside that, but then it went to the next step. And then because the if else was false, it came here. So if I run this, you'll notice it does not go inside the else. Okay? It only gets to the next step after the if test. It runs the loop because it's in the if. Okay, it's in here, but it does not run this because that was true, it wasn't false. Okay? So far it's pretty simple in that if what's in here is true, it's going to do it. Otherwise, it's going to look for an else. If it doesn't have one, it goes to the next step. If it has an else and what's in here is false, it's going to execute that and then go to the next step, which in this case is quit. Okay? So those are the 2 types. Now, I've seen students spend hours making very convoluted if, else, if, because you can put an if statement inside an if. So you can say, if this is true, if this is true, else, if this is true, and you can wrap yourself around the axle. There are a few times where you might want to go too deep. But if you're really finding yourself nesting if statements and if else statements too much, the logic can quickly get convoluted to where you begin to hide errors if in different combinations of trues and falses. So what they've given us in C is an ability to create a variable that has different values. Okay? And of those values, you can take a branch of your code. You can select a path based on the value of that variable. And that variable has to be any built-in common data type from which you can identify in C. So we're going to use integer, and we're going to show you what's called a switch statement. Okay? And we're going to talk about a switch statement. Now, the format's pretty simple. We're going to switch on a variable, okay? And it's going to have a block of code associated with it. Okay, and that's it. Now, the variable we're going to use is argc, because that's going to come back with 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. It's going to always be at least 1. Okay? So, in our switch statement, we're going to say the first case is going to be 1, colon. And now we can put our statements of what we want to do. So I'm just going to say print f, there is only one argument. And it would help if I put it in quotation marks. Okay? Now, this is the one time I will allow you to use the break command, because otherwise it's going to fall through every other command. Okay? So when I say break, it means I've done what I wanted to do for case 1, leave the switch. And I'm going to show you what happens if you don't do that. Okay, but now it might be 2. Okay, now for expedience sake, I'm going to just copy this and paste it. And then I'm going to do this. And go case 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we'll say there are 2 arguments and then I'm going to say this, Control C, and you'll notice that I've learned early on to use copy and paste, or Control C, Control V, fairly heavily to save me time. Now I just go 3, 4, 5, 6. Now if there's more than 6, okay, I'm going to use what I call default. Meaning if it doesn't find one of these above, you're going to do this one. And it's going to say print, Control C, Control V. Wow. Let's use a fancy word, is a plethora of command line arguments. Okay? And then let's tighten this up a little because I don't need that much space. All right, to my closing parentheses. All right, now we're going to play with this and see what we get. Okay, so let's Control Save, go back here, do a clear, make select, /select, let's do something in the middle like 3. We're going to get our normal, oh, look what I forgot, all my /ns. Okay. So that was my second one, so it did it right, and it gave me there are 2 arguments. Okay. I was a little confusing in how I did that, so let me put the /ns in there. And if you're watching this video and you were watching me forget the /ns, good for you. Part of knowing how to program is knowing what you like to mess up the most. And there's a couple things that I'm really bad at, and remembering my /ns happens to be one of them. Okay. Now, I'm going to make this a little more clear when I do this. make select clear, because putting a 3 in there is misleading. All right, so let's just say / select Ray. Okay, so it looped through, and there are 2 arguments. This is argument 0, this is argument 1. Okay, so I got to the correct one. So now let's say / select, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops. / select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And there you can see there are 6 arguments. Okay? Because there are 5 that come after 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 makes 6 arguments. And that's the top end of my switch, if you remember. I can only do up to 6. So let's go beyond and make sure it hits the default. Okay? So let's say / select and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it prints them all out in the loop while there's a plethora of command line arguments. Okay? Now, the only other thing I want to make a point of is in default, notice I did not need a break. Okay? Because it's the end, right? If it doesn't catch it in here, I can do this one. Now, if I don't do this, and I'm going to comment these out, and by the way, this is a really good trick for testing code if you want to temporarily remove commands and not break your code or have to retype it. It's called commenting out your code. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to run this with only 1 extra command. We'll just do / select A and watch what happens. Okay. Oh, I didn't make it. Hold on. Make select. I was like, that ran perfectly. That's not right. Let's try this again. / select A. There we go. All right. So it says there are 2 arguments, there's 3 arguments, there's 4 arguments, there's 5 arguments, there's 6 arguments. Wow, there's a plethora. That is not correct execution, right? Now, there may be a situation in which you wanted to jump in part of the way through and do everything else. So in C and in other languages, break is optional, okay? But what I'm showing you is the selection criteria, not for when you want to drop partially through, but that's also applicable here. But in most cases, you want to do something specific based on this value and then move to the next commands. Okay? So break is optional, and it's really the only place I should ever see a break in your code, because it's the only way to get out of a switch. Okay? But a switch is a very, very useful thing in C and other languages. Unfortunately, in the language Python, switch does not exist, and there's a lot of people that are very unhappy about that. So hopefully in future languages, future versions of Python, it will exist. But you have now seen the conditionals of the language C, and they're pretty simple. A basic if, an if-else, and a switch. So hopefully now you've seen an if statement and if-else, what conditionals really bring to the equation as far as flow and control in our computers, and what a switch statement is, and why those are really kind of cool when you have several possibilities of where you may need to branch in your program. So selection is very important. It's the second pillar. And in the next video, we're going to talk about the third pillar, which is iteration.